As a disclaimer, there are some points in this video which may not be considered suitable for all youngsters, so if you're under 12 years old, have your parents check this video for you first.
Hey creatures, it's Em, and if you're watching this video, it's because the Creature Crew has just grown to over 300,000 subscribers. Crazy! To celebrate our growing community of animal lovers, I thought I'd share a little bit more of my ever peculiar adventure that happens to be my life. It involves 6-foot tree frogs almost dying whilst trying to become Batman, and a ton of cool animals which I will attempt to draw. This is the official Draw My Life, Emzotic style. My story begins at the Royal Free Hospital in London on the day that I hatched, April 14th, 1988. I'm told that I was born in the middle of the night, so I like to imagine it being dark outside, and given that I was born in London, it was probably raining. A lot. As a baby, I had awful eczema all over my body and I would scratch myself raw. To combat this, my parents put cute little socks on my hands so that I wouldn't scratch so much and hurt my skin. My early years were super happy and carefree. My mum, my dad, and my big sister and I all lived in a big traditional English house with a beautiful garden filled with pear trees and apple trees, cherry trees, and lots of lavender. While my big sister would play sensibly with her tea set, I would spend hours in the garden digging up worms, which is where my first pet came from, Squirm the worm. When I was 6, my parents told my sister and I that we were going to have a new sibling. They asked us whether we wanted a little brother or a little sister. My big sister said she definitely wanted a baby brother, so this way she could have a little sister and a little brother. I said I wanted a puppy. Well, a few months later, and out popped my little brother who completed our family, but not as much as a puppy would have. Just kidding, love you! Just a few weeks after my little brother was born, we packed up and moved across the world to Hong Kong. It was a total culture shock for me. I was so sad to leave my friends behind and I didn't want to move to Hong Kong. To cheer us up, my dad bought us ice creams for me and my sister as soon as we got off the plane. So I pointed to the red ice cream tub. I took a big lick and I was almost sick. It was not strawberry, it was red bean. Talk about a culture shock. Adjusting to a new country and a new school was really difficult. I joined the school halfway through the year, so everyone already had their friends. I had a lot of friends back in London, but this was the first time that I encountered what it felt like to be a bit of a social outcast. Although no one was really mean to me, the white girls didn't really want to hang out with me because I wasn't exactly white. And the Asian girls didn't really want to hang out with me because I wasn't exactly Asian and I didn't speak the language. You see, I'm mixed, Spanish and Chinese, and this is something I'm really proud of now, but back then it just meant I was a bit weird. During one particularly lonely recess, I told the playground supervisor that I had no friends to play with. She gave me a skipping rope and told me to play alone. This teacher also used to take away my lunch on a number of occasions and also told me not to eat anymore. Cue a lifetime of body image issues. I eventually made friends with a small group of misfits and we used to break into these abandoned quarries to find lizards. At home, I had a pair of budgies, which my parents gave me, some terrapins, which many homes in Asia have because they're a symbol of luck, and a canary, which was found in the mouth of one of my neighbor's vigilas. I also snuck home a rat in a Pringles tube and raised it in secret for weeks. When my parents found out, they were not happy, but they let me keep him. When I went to high school, the movie Clueless was huge, and I thought that it was the cool thing to appear kind of dumb, and that maybe this would make the boys like me. Nope. The first boy I ever had a massive crush on did not like me in the slightest. I would hang out by his locker, and when I found out that he was leaving school forever, I plucked up the courage and gave him a beautifully carved soap which looked like a rose. I even wrapped it. He accepted it, stomped on it, and peed on it. Yeah. Then the Harry Potter books came out and everyone was in a frenzy. My friends and I just started to learn how to use the internet and we discovered a religion about magic. We thought it was like some kind of fun game and we would go to the discount shop and we bought cheap notebooks to become our pretend spell books and basically wrote down our crush's names inside. Well, some of the girls in school found out and you know what kids can be like. From then on, nobody would talk to us. And some of the girls were really cruel school with their remarks. There was even a rumor for a while that I was a werewolf, but to be fair, I was such a feral looking thing that I really can't blame them for that one. The bullying and the taunting got to me, and my self-esteem plummeted. To make up for how much I was hurting, I became tough and mean. I was always grumpy and I wore a scowl on my face. My grades suffered, and I was even guilty of being mean to the few friends that I had because I was so scared that they were going to abandon me. Things weren't completely hopeless because although I was hurting at school, I was very dedicated and I had an after-school and weekend job that I loved. I had been working in a pet shop and hanging out at a vet's clinic, learning, observing, and eventually I was also accepted to work at the Hong Kong RSPCA, which is just now the SPCA. I was entrusted with looking after the stray dogs that would come in, socializing, walking, basic obedience training. Eventually, I became so good at this that I was allowed to interview potential families about their lifestyles and pairing them with suitable dogs. When I was 14, I moved back to London, and although the previous few years had been hard, I was sad to leave Hong Kong. It's got such a unique vibe and it has so much wildlife. In London, I was sent to a prestigious all-girls school where everyone was so nice. It was actually the same school that Amy Winehouse went to, and I actually had her old locker and her old books. I was really happy there. I made friends with an awesome group of girls and we called each other Squid. Together we were the Squids, which I think stood for the sexy queens under intense demand. It sounded good at the time. At this school, I had a careers advisor who told me that my grades were not good enough to do the job that I wanted to do, which was to be a vet. She told me instead to focus on acting because my theatre grades were really good, so I did. I did my exams and left that school with decent grades, and I went on to college, which isn't the same as college in America. It's more like further education for over 17-year-olds. I really didn't want to go to university, so instead I chose to do something called a BTEC in performing arts. But the school that I had chosen, against my parents' wishes, was a very rough school. At this college, I saw all sorts of things that I had been sheltered from, and I saw things that people should never have to see. It was here that I met my first boyfriend. He made me feel safe at this college, but he was not a good match for me. My parents knew best, and although they weren't supportive of the relationship at all, they allowed me to make my own mistakes and grow. This guy we will call L. L made me feel special, and slowly he would convince me that my old friends from school, my squids, were just laughing at me, and they didn't miss me, and they hated me. I became so paranoid. Under my controlling boyfriend's instruction, I deleted my squids from my life. I was convinced that they didn't want me anymore, and I'd regretted that decision instantly. I truly felt alone at this point and so miserable. My parents had to move back to Hong Kong at this point and gave me a choice: go back with them to Hong Kong or stay in London alone. I chose to stay in London. Although they were worried about leaving me behind, I promised that I would be okay. I decided that enough was enough. I finally decided that I had to take control, and after 2 years of manipulation and realizing what a toxic person Elle was, I finally ended the relationship. Best decision ever. Against the odds in such a horrible place, I graduated from my college with a triple D grade in performing arts. Triple D? D is for distinction, distinction, distinction. Yep, I did really, really well. For a while, I actually worked as a builder for a few months to help me save some money, and then I went to drama school. Long story short, the first drama school I went to was not a good fit for me and tried to put strange ideas in my head, such as I couldn't be an actor if I kept pet snakes. Yeah. They also had an issue with people being gay and believed that it was a curable state of mind. And they had these odd practices like making classes start at 7 a.m. and keeping us there until 11 p.m. And some Saturdays we would come into school and be made to wash the walls with sugar soap. Yes, really, really weird. And they really didn't like the fact that I was into animals. They actually told me that the reason why I kept snakes was because I must have a bad relationship with my mother. Cuckoo. With the help of one of my tutors who I trusted, I transferred onto another acting school, which I enjoyed so much for 2 years. At this drama school, I was happy, but quiet, and I kept to myself as I still had the scars of college and Elle. Whilst being at this drama school, I worked on weekends in a reptile store. I was entrusted with a few private collections as well from the visitors who would come into the store, and this included looking after incredible Boelen's pythons. If you know your snakes, you know how much of a high honor this is and what a risk it is too. I was also briefly in love with a guy who worked in the reptile store who looked like a grown-up and more masculine version of Mowgli from the Jungle Book, but he broke my heart into a million pieces and basically chose another girl over me. Cue another year of crying myself to sleep and eating my weight in ice cream. My drama school was a little bit of a party scene, but I worked really hard, and during the lunch breaks when the other students were, having a cigarette or catching some rare sun rays, I was inside writing to casting directors and applying for roles. The day that I graduated from drama school, I found out that I landed a role in a really awesome horror film. This was my first big break, as I'd only done student films before this, and I was so excited. My acting career was going from strength to strength, and I had become a bit of a scream queen, doing lots of horror movies. Horror movies are so much fun to film, and the biggest film that I was part of, I actually found myself flying out to America for the premiere, where I met LEDGEWOOD and Dominic Monaghan. I can never say his last name, but he was one of the hobbits. Speaking of hobbits, I remember vaguely looking super nervous while talking to Elijah Woods and making some weird joke about hobbits. Even today, when I think about it late at night, I grit my teeth, cringe into my pillow, and hope for the darkness to swallow me up. Although I loved making films, the life of an actor is very hard, and I wasn't passionate enough about it. Meeting certain people in the film world really freaked me out and turned me off to the acting scene. I completed my remaining projects, and I decided to do what made me happy, and that's working with animals. Along with boarding exotic animals, for a while I did a string of really random jobs. I worked for a few months as a waitress in a fish restaurant, but I quit because I am deathly allergic to fish. I worked as a TV extra and as a promotional girl for Diet Coke, even though I hated Diet Coke. Somehow I found myself working as a mascot for the Rainforest Cafe in London. I dressed up as Cha-Cha the tree frog in a suit, and I really couldn't move or see out of this suit. It was 6 feet tall and I'm 5'4", so there you go. On my very first day as Cha-Cha the frog, I went out into the street and I was excited because I was gonna be the best Cha-Cha ever. I was gonna drum up so much business. But a stag do of drunken guys pushed me over and rolled me down Leicester Square. Yep, there I go, rolled down Leicester Square, trapped inside the hollow body of a giant red-eyed tree frog. And there's my resignation. Luckily, it was around this time when I managed to get a job working as a zookeeper for a really lovely little zoo. I loved it, and my two favourite animals were two donkeys called Sienna and Calypso. Although I loved being a zookeeper, I didn't feel this zoo was being run particularly well, and worst of all was my nightmarish ghoul of a co-worker who had it in for me. But I will make a more in-depth video about my time as a zookeeper some other time. After a bit of a dramatic showdown at the zoo, by a twist of fate, I started working at an animal education company, learning how to give school presentations with a whole variety of exotic animals. Birds of prey, crocodilians, snakes, meerkats, bats. I loved the job. During this time, I was in a relationship with someone we will call M. We worked together on animal shows for years and spent lots of time traveling. We raced huskies in Finland, went on safari in Africa, partied down in Hong Kong, and lived in the remote jungles of Thailand. We actually nearly died in a bat cave which we were exploring in Thailand, and suddenly there was a flash flood and the rain was coming in, and we had to basically, in the pitch black, dive in under some rocks and out the other side. It was super sketchy, but I was like, I am Batman, lol. If I were gonna die, I was gonna die with a little bit of humor. When I got back to London from my strange adventure in Thailand, I adopted an awesome ferret called Bear, and he was my soul animal. We were inseparable. He was my work colleague, my best friend, and my most precious baby. After almost 6 years of being together, it didn't work out for us because we wanted different things and we realized how different we were. Our relationship counselor told me that I was a race car and he was a comfy cushion, and that I just couldn't expect to turn someone who was happy being looking a certain way into a race car to keep up with my life. The breakup was hard, but it was for the best. With that breakup, I lost everything. We shared the animals. Of course, I kept Bear, but I had worked hard in that relationship to grow the business that we shared. I thought we were a team. But when we broke up, I decided I didn't want to claim anything. Not the thousands we had in the bank, and not the business or the bookings. I told myself that if I could make money once, I could do it again. And this time, it would just be for me. It's really hard to go from living your life with someone to living alone, and I was so lonely, but determined to carry on. Luckily, as fate would have it, I had a best friend who would later become my soulmate. You may know him as Danny. Although we lived on opposite sides of the world, we had met several times over the years, and we just clicked. My parents were not sure about Danny. I mean, although we'd been friends for years and met a bunch of times, he was still relatively unknown to them. Danny knew how much my family's peace of mind meant to me, and he arranged to meet with my parents to formally introduce himself. Yep, he flew from New Jersey all the way to Hong Kong for 8 hours just to introduce himself. It went well. Through determination and hard work, I had built a thriving doggy daycare. I loved the business so much and I felt so fulfilled. Then I found something on the back of my knee. My doctors told me to prepare for the worst, and I had to go for biopsies and surgeries. I had no choice but to close the business. I had no one else to run the daycare. I was so cut up. My business, my thriving startup, had gone. Thankfully, my biopsies came back negative and I went back to work as an animal educator. This meant waking up at 4 a.m. every day, and I got home at 10 p.m. on most nights. It was tough, but I loved working with the animals, and the job had perks like raising baby meerkats. I saved all of my money to fund my trips across the world to see Danny, and vice versa.
I can tell you now that long distance is hard and expensive.
In 2016, I had a little bit of a shock. Danny and I were surprised to find out that we were expecting. I definitely didn't feel ready, and I panicked because we were long distance, but although I was scared, Danny was so supportive, and I went back to my doctors for a scan. This is where I found out that the pregnancy wasn't viable and we wouldn't be having a baby. There was a baby, but no life. I won't go into the details of what happened soon after, but I was in no doubt that I had lost the baby. For 3 months, I felt so sick, but I carried on with my work. I was living in a cloud for 3 months, and I barely remember anything from this time. One rare Saturday off, I was in Oxford Street, and I had awful pain in my lower abdomen, and I just couldn't stop bleeding. I rushed home and called my closest friends to tell them that I was losing a lot of blood. By the time I got home, I was so dazed and in so much pain, but I wouldn't let my friends see me. Eventually, I started slipping in and out of consciousness, and I had to allow one of my friends in to help me as I waited for the ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, they told me that I'd already lost 3 pints of blood and that my state was critical. I remember very little about being in the hospital, but I do remember refusing a blood transfusion. The hospital saved my life and informed me of what had caused my bleeding. In short, my body hadn't fully miscarried the first time, and I still had parts of my baby inside for 3 months, and this was slowly poisoning me and making me very sick. The next day, I just sat at home with my ferret Bear, who slept with me all day long and covered me in little kisses. Something clicked inside of me that day, and I realized how short and fragile life is. I decided to work hard and to better my life and to get to a point where I could support myself enough to finally be with Danny. Just as I was starting to pick myself up, my old ferret Bear left the world, and I made a video about coping with pet loss, which really helped me to deal with his absence. As a way to help me with my grief, I started my YouTube channel. My first video was a weird makeup tutorial, which I have set to private now, but then I took a chance and uploaded my first animal video featuring my cockroaches, rice and beans. Soon, my channel started to gain some traction, and I was feeling so happy that I was connecting with people around the world, educating and sharing stories about animals and just having fun. I made enough money one month to buy some animal food, and then I had enough to support myself myself without having to go to work so many days a week. I decided eventually to become a full-time digital animal educator. And finally, after so many years, I finally had enough money to join Danny. I petitioned to bring some of my animals with me, but the US government said absolutely not. So in the end, I could only bring Car. But don't worry, the rest of my animals are safely in the loving hands of my good friends, family, and ex-colleagues. I still get to go home and visit them, which is what I'll be doing soon, and I cannot wait to see my babies again. After so many years of obsessively working myself to the bone and being alone, I finally have the ability to wake up every day next to the person I love, and I'm surrounded by an incredible menagerie of beautiful animals. And I get to reach hundreds of thousands of people who share a deep love and passion for animals. There's still a long way to go in my life, and I'm finally slowly laying the foundations, but I'm not afraid. If I've made it through all of that and plenty which I've omitted from this story, I can make it through anything, especially if I have all of you, the creature crew, beside me. I have so much I want to do, achieve, see, and accomplish for animals worldwide. Stay with me. I can't see the future, but I know it's looking bright. And this is where our story ends for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye!